record. Hello, and welcome to our new episode of The Virtual Psychiatrist. I'm your host, Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai. Today, we have with us Dr. Christopher Russo. Dr. Russo is an interventional pain medicine doctor. Dr. Russo is an interventional pain doctor who went through trial with Dr. Batra. He is a graduate of the University of South Florida Pain Medicine Fellowship and a graduate of the anesthesiology residency program at the University of Michigan Medical School. Dr. Russo and myself were recently attending the criminal federal trial of Dr. Neil Anand, and we heard together the unfortunate news that the jury has convicted him on all charges. Today, we're meeting to talk a little bit about this case and bring in some perspective, a human perspective, from two individuals who've been through federal criminal trials on the impact, the human impact of such trials and the toll that it has on physician humans. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Russo. And you can tell us a little bit about your experience, and then we can talk about Dr. Anand.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Rifai. It's a pleasure. I just want the audience to know that I met Dr. Rifai for the first time during the first week of Dr. Anand's trial. We both were in the courtroom for a certain period of time, and I had known Dr. Rifai, had followed his case, and I was aware of his acquittal, and we've become friends online and through various social media platforms, and I have a lot of respect for you and what you went through, and thank you for the invitation to talk about our mutual friend today.
So what is it like going through a federal criminal trial, an indictment, and everything that it does to the career of a physician, to the life of a physician, to his family, to his loved ones, to what does it do? And a lot of people don't understand the human toll that such experiences have on physicians as humans.
Well, my personal experience being prosecuted for 3.5 years and rejecting all of the plea deals that were offered to me, I can say that it is a very unpleasant experience, and that's stating it mildly. Hearing about Dr. Anand's guilty verdict came as a complete shock to me. I was heartbroken. I felt like for at least, since Tuesday, like I've been kicked in the teeth. I've gotten to know Dr. Anand, and not only, through the courtroom, but shortly after my acquittal in 2022, I have a condo down in Boca Grande, Florida, and I invited Dr. Anand to come and spend a week with me just so he could get his head straight and take some time away from Philadelphia and all of the uncertainty and unpleasantries surrounding his prosecution. And he did actually accept my invitation and came and joined me down here in Boca Grande, and it's a beautiful community. And we bonded. We went out and had food. We swam. We snorkeled. We went fishing. We just had fun in the sun, and it was a wonderful experience. And I got to know him as a human being, and now I consider him a good friend. I am heartbroken for his family. when I was in Philadelphia, I was staying with Dr. Anand for the entire 10 days that I was there. I flew in a couple of days before the trial and stayed in his beautiful house, which, you know, is sort of his own prison now. I mean, um, not to share too much, but Dr. Anand was a board certified anesthesiologist with two different fellowships, a fellowship in cardiothoracic anesthesiology and a fellowship in regional anesthesia. He was running his own pain clinic. He's a very impressive guy, not only intellectually, but personally. He's got a great sense of humor. He's fairly laid back, which is surprising considering, everything that's swirling about him. But I got to see and meet his family and sort of um, live in his shoes for a little while, and it brought back really unpleasant memories. I mean, he's living in a big house that he bought with his wife for the first time, and they had a toddler, and his life was going great, and he was accomplished, and he was a 9/11 first responder hero when he was recognized by the University of New York, New York University. Evidently, he had rushed out into the 9/11 ground zero when the buildings came down, and he was providing aid to victims and first responders. I mean, when I found that out, it really didn't surprise me because that's just the kind of guy he is. But he's living in a house that has been abandoned. His wife left him the day he was arrested, and she took their toddler, and he hasn't seen either of them in 5 years. And this was a perfect house to build a life and to build a family and raise your kids in, and now it's really just uh, neglected. The landscaping is neglected and the house is neglected. And there's all these memories of what the life he used to have. And, his family, I met his mom and his sister and his dad, and, they're all just kind of walking around in a fog because they just cannot believe that all of this has come down on him. His older sister's a neurologist, and I didn't meet his brother, but evidently he's an endocrinologist. So, a very accomplished family, very humble, very friendly, very welcoming, and yeah, I'm glad to be here to discuss these things because I thought, I was certain that Dr. Not, you can never be certain of these things, but um, I had looked at the trial and caught up with the case and the charges against Dr. Nan, and I just didn't see them proving anything beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I found out from Dr. Ibsen that he had been, three of his co-defendants were either released on Rule 29 or found not guilty by the jury, and Dr. Nan was found guilty on all the charges. It just didn't compute, and so I've been sort of hurting not only for myself and our friendship, but for his family and his, potentially for his future and for his freedom. I don't know how we got into this lawfare dumpster where these rogue attorney generals and these assistant U.S. attorneys are going after, physicians who are taking care of, chronic pain patients, some of the most vulnerable patients on the planet. And, we are being weeded out, and there's a lot of potential reasons for that. But anyways,
And it's heartbreaking the fact that the Department of Justice just label us as thieves, as grifters,
yeah,
as people who steal from Medicare. I know my press release was Lehigh Valley psychiatrist stole from Medicare. And this my four charges were $43.46 each, less than $180. And they said I stole from Medicare. And it turns out that they had fabricated the whole thing.
right.
And so we have an out of control Justice Department that is just going after almost everybody.
A couple points that I can completely relate to you. I had five charges. I think conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, aiding and abetting, and then there were some individual charges as it related to some patients that I actually inherited from another doctor because he left, and I was assuming their care, and they were long-term patients. I wasn't making any new decisions or diagnoses. I was just carrying out the treatment plan of one of the physicians who had gone to a different practice, and they actually charged me with a $25 little vial of Depomedrol. That was a charge. They
Not even a controlled substance. The
no,
same thing that they did with Dr. Anand.
yep,
Goodie bags,
a
non-controlled
$25
substances, goodie bags.
a
And
$25 bottle of steroid that's used has been used since the dawn of time in pain medicine and anesthesia to treat chronic inflammatory issues along the spine and peripheral nerves. I mean, you just can't make this up. You just, furthermore, when we were talking about these charges, when I was arrested back in December of 2018, I was arrested and dragged around in chains on December 6th. And the assistant attorney went before the cameras and they made all sorts of these pronouncements about how we were terrible people and we were guilty. And we had the biggest pain practice in the United States with 25,000 former and current patients. And they declared, and I don't know how they got away with this, that all of our patients were addicts and we were taking advantage of people who had the disease of addiction. And this was an egregious violation of the public trust. And my question for them was, how did they make this determination? They didn't have an expert medical review at the time. So we have these assistant U.S. attorneys who are, going in front of the cameras. And they love doing that. By the way, it's, political cover, and they can grab our assets and they get media exposure.
and that is in violation of the Justice Manual.
Well,
I'm in that process right now, but the Justice Manual, which is basically the manual for the United States Department of Justice, which has kind of outlines how the prosecutions and how U.S. attorneys should function.
right.
There's a section on media contact policy and what are they allowed to put in and what they're not allowed to put in. And they have to exercise caution and due diligence when they make comments to the media.
Right.
And you can see that that goes out the door. They're not supposed to besmirch the personality of a defendant unless they have him convicted. In my press release, they even denied me the presumption of innocence. Every press release is supposed to have a presumption of innocence statement. In my press release that was done on November 14th, 2022, they omitted that line completely. I did not even have the presumption of innocence. I was completely guilty from day one.
I completely understand that the similar situation happened to us. When I got home and I read the press release and watched the videos and then the news reports, we were both in the news, in the print media and on the local TV news stations. And they were already pronouncing us guilty. We didn't even have, back to that original point, the prosecutors were making all these medical judgments and determinations about what we were doing and how this was not medical care and outside the scope of practice and outside the standard practice and the typical announcements that they tend to make when they arrest doctors. But they didn't even get a medical expert to review our files until 22 months later. So my question is, none of these attorneys for the government went to medical school. How in the heck were they able to make these sorts of medical determinations and then criminal determinations about the way we were practicing medicine when they had no expert medical review? When they went to the news media, they released a statement, and then they were before the cameras. The parrots in the news media, from the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News and Fox 2 News, and on and on and on, they ran with it. They were the lapdogs, and they were just propagating, parroting everything that these attorneys had told them via the press release and the news conference. We were guilty before proven innocent, just like in your case, Doctor.
And there's a lot of political changes that are happening in the country right now, and the thought is that some of the reigning of the powers of the United States Department of Justice, that is being done in an unjust way, and that we are going to regret that some of the powers of these prosecutors or some of these prosecutors are being let go. But it's I think it is a culture in the United States Department of Justice and the different United States attorneys offices. It's a culture, and I called it in front of a judge. We called it discriminatory animus,
Yep.
and we called it confirmation bias. I mean, they basically determined that you are guilty from the get go.
Yep.
The federal
Well,
agents, the prosecutors, you're guilty from the get go
I
before
think that
they come
I
to
think.
you.
Well, excuse me. I'm sorry. Let me
Go ahead.
interrupt you. I think these U.S. attorneys and attorney generals at the state level, they're unaccountable. They have no real skin in the game.
Mhm.
There's a playbook, a playbook that's been issued from the the powers that be in D.C. on how to prosecute doctors, and it's a play-by-play how to beat the doctor's defense, how to um, um, win in court and secure either plea deals or convictions. And that's why they have such a high conviction rate. I mean, I think their conviction rate is 99.6% or some outrageous number like that. So they have a playbook, and the playbook really is revolves around three different um, um, scenarios. One, arrest the doctor and smear him as rich and greedy and uncaring about his patients. The second tenet or the pillar of their prosecutions, they need to find somebody who's willing to speak bad about uh, the doctor's practice, whether it's threatening former employees to turn on the doctor or finding disgruntled patients who are willing to testify against the doctor, whether it's what they have to say is true or not. In our case, everything that was said to us in court was contradicted by what was in the medical record, thankfully. And then the third pillar is to try to confuse a medically naive jury onto what the standard of practice really is. And they can get away with murder. And like I said, these prosecutors go after physicians because, one, they're low hanging fruit. They usually have some assets, and they can forfeit the assets right away. And pressure, try to stall and pressure the physician to take a plea deal just because of the sentencing. If you're found guilty, it's just so outrageous that most doctors will just accept a plea to avoid the potential of being sent away to prison for 20 years. And like I said, the prosecutors see this as easy pickings. The doctors don't tend to shoot back. Um, when they go in and raid a doctor's office, it's usually air conditioned. Like I said, there's no guns pointed at them. They can take everything that the doctor owns and then jump in front of the media cameras and get a lot of publicity. And I think it's also political cover for the illicit fentanyl poisoning crisis that's going on, and also personal ambition. Going after a doctor and an upstanding member of the community makes for good press. And then when they're done, they can probably make it home in time for dinner. So it certainly has more advantages over going after like organized crime or terrorists or street drug dealers or white collar embezzlement, where those targets are much harder. And these prosecutors, like I said, even when they fail, they usually fail upwards. I mean, you can't get rid of them. Most of them advance. Ours certainly did. The lead prosecutor in our case was uh, after she lost what was considered the biggest loss for the Department of Justice in over 10 years. She was promoted to federal judge. And, we're just all shaking our heads. She got humiliated in federal court. We dismantled the case. We completely proved our innocence, and she still was nominated and then got confirmed to the federal judiciary. So, and then
For
you can't
life,
even
for
sue
life,
them. Yeah,
life.
for life. Oh yeah, yeah, for life. And then you can't even sue them when they in my case, and I'm not trying to make this a sob story about me, but I was arrested at age 50. I was living in a small one bedroom, one bath condo in Birmingham, Michigan. It was less than 900 square feet. I paid something like, 290,000 for it. Nothing outrageous in the city of Birmingham. I mean, it's very, very upscale area, but I was on the low end, the low rent area, so to speak. And, I was driving a 2006 Ford F-150, and,
Were
I
you
was,
were you living with the in the ghetto that our friend talked
no,
about?
no. I would no. The city of Birmingham is there's nothing ghetto about the city of Birmingham, but those mansions go up into the tens of millions of dollars in that city. And I found a one bedroom, one bath. It wasn't much bigger than an extended stay hotel suite, but I was happy.
There
And
you
I
go.
was going to work every day, and I was saving my money, and I wasn't living a lavish lifestyle. I was trying to do the very best I could. Now I'm not perfect, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've made mistakes that I regret. But you know what? I was not a bad person, and I certainly wasn't a fraudster. And I was very proud to work for Dr. Rahendra Batra. He is a very distinguished person, and he was their main target. I was just kind of a small fish in the big net. But the prosecutors proceeded to destroy my life because they wanted me to turn on Dr. Batra and cough him up, and I was unwilling to do that. And my parents are healthcare professionals. My dad's a neurosurgeon. My mom is a dentist. My sister's a nurse. And we all got together and they asked me if I was guilty, and I said I'm not guilty of anything. So they said fight it. So I fought it, but I had to. I wasn't able to work. I had these restrictive bond conditions. They threw me in federal detention for 6 months and then put me in a halfway house for 2 years with an ankle monitor. They just tried to make life miserable. I had to sell my house and my investment properties and dig into my 401k to pay the lawyers. And, that was as stressful as it was for me. I'm most resentful about the stress that it caused my sister and my mother and my stepfather. My mother doesn't sleep well. She's in her late 70s, and she didn't sleep well for 3.5 years while we were waiting for our trial and eventual acquittal. And my sister was trying to raise a young family and be a good mother, and she was working as a nurse and be a good wife, and raise a family of three children. And what this did to her. She loves me very much, and she was scared, and I saw it in her eyes. She was scared of losing me, and I was scared of going to prison and watching my parents get old and die while I was stuck behind bars. So, like I said, I don't want this to be about me. We should, obviously
Now
get
I saw and I
Dr.
saw
Anand.
that in Dr. Anand's dad. I
Yeah,
mean, we met with him during the trial, and he's a broken man. I mean, he's I saw it, the sadness. He couldn't eat. I mean, we bought
yep,
lunch together when we were in court,
yep.
and he couldn't eat. I mean, this was delicious food, and he just sat there and couldn't eat. And
I
and
I
and
saw it too, Doc. I saw it too. I saw it in his mother, and even we went over to his sister's house. We weren't discussing the case because she was sequestered, but we went over just to have some food and meet and greet kind of thing. And it's like I said, Dr. Anand's parents raised three outstanding children who grew up to be doctors. I mean, that's the dream of any parent. And they did everything right in raising their kids, and now they have one who's facing potentially 20 plus years in prison. I mean, they were just in a fog, like you said. And even his older sister, who's a neurologist, you could tell that their family was suffering. She was raising kids and she was a wife, and I met her husband. And that whole the ripple effect from these charges just sort of spread out into not only your immediate family, but to your acquaintances, your professional relationships, into your finances, into your social life, into your romantic relationships. It just goes on and on and on, and it's absolutely devastating. And I would have never believed it if I hadn't gone through it myself. It is horrific. And I think that they tried so hard to pressure me to plead.
hmm hmm
And it felt like extortion. It really did. My plea agreement, among other things, was 37 months in prison and a restitution of $1.2 million. And that was more than my net worth. I was age 50 and been working on my whole life, not spending much money, and including my house and property. I don't even think I was worth that much. And I had worked for Dr. Bothra for 2.5 years, and my penalty for working for their target was to cough up everything that I'd ever earned, spend 37 months in prison, and never work as a physician again, because they would took your license and you could never be involved in any sort of federal or state health insurance program. So that's Medicare, Medicaid. So you're immediately excluded from ever practicing again if you happen to get out and regain your status as a physician. And if I didn't accept this, they said they were going to push for a minimum of 240 months in prison. That's 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's extortion. That's how they secure these plea deals. That's this playbook. And I think it's criminal, and they don't have any accountability whatsoever. And it's outrageous.
And to think of it, the main trial attorney, the main DOJ trial attorney, he's like a bulldozer going from one place to another. Paul Koob.
Yep.
He prosecuted another fellow Syrian physician, Dr. Louis Kusa, in Kentucky, that was defended by Ronald Chapman.
Yeah,
and in
he lost that case.
Yeah, and in that case, they basically indicted Dr. Kusa. They found nothing on him. They
for
basically
$6 EKGs, right? Something like that.
10 $6 EKGs.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, 10 $6 EKGs. Those are the 10 healthcare fraud charges against him. And basically giving controlled substances to somebody who had an obvious injury after meeting with them for 6 times. Yep. 6 times, sending them for physical therapy, sending them for MRIs. They even created the MRIs. They even created a radiology, a fictitious radiology center to send the MRIs to the doctor. They created a fictitious previous doctor's office to send records to Dr. Kusa. And then they had the audacity to say, well, he violated the prescribing rules and regulations.
Well, that brings up some bad memories. In our case, the Bothra case in Detroit, the FBI sent in a confidential informant that they had somehow agreed to wire up, and he came in for 11 visits, and they paid him $1,500 per visit, and he had been thrown out of another pain clinic in the area. He had some domestic charges out of California, so they must have given him a deal. They wired him up and sent him, and he was an actively using crack cocaine addict. He was testing positive for crack cocaine while he was being sent in to set us up, and they fabricated. He had a fake shoulder injury and this and that. They also sent in an undercover FBI agent who pretended to have some sort of pain syndrome, and he was being seen by one of my co-defendants, Dr. Lewis. Now, this guy thought he was clever because he had fabricated, like you just said, his own MRI off the internet. Now, it was a real MRI with real pathological findings, but it was fabricated. It wasn't him. He created a false radiology department with a false phone number and email, and some place out of Wisconsin or something, and a fake radiologist. And furthermore, he actually used the name of the radiologist and the referring physician on the radiology report as fictional Dan Aykroyd movie characters, from like one of Dan Aykroyd's comedies. He named these people after Dan Aykroyd, and he also used a phone number that came out of one of Dan Aykroyd's comedies. And because we didn't recognize that these were Dan Aykroyd movie character names, that we were somehow guilty of criminal fraud and we deserve to be in prison for 20 years. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. And on the undercover videos, Dr. Lewis's care was outstanding. I mean, he referred him to a surgery, offered an injection, he offered physical therapy, he offered low dose, hydrocodone with a non-narcotic pain management strategies. I mean, textbook stuff. But this guy still came into court and said, because we didn't recognize that these reports were fictitious and were from Dan Aykroyd movie character named physicians, that we were guilty. and we should be found guilty and go to prison. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. Um, so yeah, brings back bad memories.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in my own case, they sent an undercover because there was nothing in the healthcare fraud case. So they sent an undercover police officer to my office because they said I prescribed too much Adderall for little kids who have ADHD. And this police officer came, and their expectations was that I'm going to see her for 5 minutes and give her Adderall and send her on her merry way.
Right.
She spent 2 hours in my office.
Unbelievable.
2 hours. It was so long. The visit was so long that their recorders ran out of time. Basically, they basically it didn't record the entire interview. And even with that, they came back and said, well, he fabricated the records because we don't have record of what was said, so he must have fabricated it. But they didn't
Right.
have a record of what was
Right.
said, but they just assumed that it was fabricated. And the undercover police officer basically made a fictitious persona that she's a hairdresser. However, their mistake was she wasn't as clever as your FBI officer. Her mistake was that she said that she's a licensed hairdresser. And for unknown reasons, there is a licensed hairdresser in the same fictitious name that she gave in Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, it is a crime to impersonate a licensed professional in the
Wow.
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So she committed a crime, an
Wow.
actual crime under the law to come and basically convince me that she needs medications for Adderall. Not
Right.
even that. The whole trial went that I basically fabricated her diagnosis of ADHD, that she didn't have ADHD. She made it up. And then lo and behold, we found out that her brother, the brother of the actual police officer, the real persona of the police officer,
Yeah.
her real brother sued her in federal court in front of the same judge that was my judge in the criminal trial. And the whole lawsuit was about the diagnosis of ADHD in the family. You cannot make this stuff up.
You
And this
you
and
you
she
can't
was
make it up.
on the stand saying, this doctor fabricated the entire thing. I don't have ADHD. And then 5 years earlier, her brother was suing her in front of the same judge for the
Wow.
fact that there was ADHD in the family.
Yeah, that brings up a whole different set of issues about the judge, and
Uh,
that's for a whole nother podcast. But back to this attorney who was prosecuting and secured the conviction against Dr. Anand, and I had read, he must have been 10. Dr. Anand is, I think, 47, 48, and this guy must have been 10 years younger, in his
mhm,
late 30s.
mhm.
And I had read something somewhere that, he's been very successful, as an attorney and as a federal prosecutor. And he and his family live in a $1.7 million home.
Yes, yes.
Now, that was $1 million more than Dr. Anand's house was worth.
Mhm, mhm.
When Dr. Anand was arrested, he said he bought his house for something like 500, between 5 and 600,000, which is, still a very nice house, and it's a hefty chunk of change. But
Hold on a
as a
second.
practicing,
That is an average house in suburban Philadelphia.
okay, well,
That
you know what? And Dr. Anand was practicing medicine. He had a reasonable expectation to rely on an income, given his particular skill set. So it wasn't outrageous that he would purchase a $500,000, $600,000 house. But the attorney, who's a government employee, a federal government employee, was able to secure a $1.7 million home, and yet he was 10 years younger. And let me take this up too. It takes twice as long to become an interventional pain physician than it does to become a U.S. attorney. I believe it. Become a U.S. attorney, when you're hired in out of law school or whatever they do, is, I believe, minimum 7 years, maybe 8.
mhm,
To
mhm.
become a practicing, and Dr. Anand had 2 fellowships, so that would put him at the 15-year post um, high school training level, right? So he had twice as much training as any U.S. attorney that's out there. you know. And like, I don't know that much about the training, but I think it's 3 years of law school, maybe 4 years or 4 years of undergrad, 3 or 4 years of law school, and then you can be hired in as a U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
So the path is relatively, in my eyes, fairly easy.
Yeah, 26,
Um,
27. You're a assistant United States attorney.
right.
You're
I didn't start
prosecuting
earning
people
income
who.
until I was in my early 30s.
Yep, yep. And to just to see the amount of made up stuff that we saw in court. When we were in court, we witnessed this undercover person that they sent to Dr. Anand's office. And we saw when the defense played the entire tape.
Yep.
This is a person that the prosecution was claiming that she was disabled, that Dr. Anand prescribed her narcotics needlessly. She was somebody who was on tape, undercover by the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
She is functional. She is working. She is on tape while undercover for the FBI to ensnare a pain management physician. She was making phone call appointments as a phlebotomist to set up appointments to go do phlebotomy on other patients,
Yes,
on,
I
on,
saw
on
that.
her clients.
I saw that with my own eyes, and those videos were selectively edited and manipulated in order to manipulate the jury. That was unbelievable. I'll tell you another thing that really just shocked me was that somehow the government had turned one of Dr. Anand's patients. Now, this guy was about 5'8", probably 390 pounds, disheveled, amputee, had been in a couple of our car wrecks, who had been seen and evaluated by multiple specialists on the outside, was finally referred to a pain management specialist after failing just about everything that they possibly could try on him. And he comes in and he's been seen by Dr. Anand for 3 years. And he came in and testified, and it came out in court that he had been prescribed low dose opiates, similar to what he'd been receiving on the outside. He was also receiving non narcotic pain management strategies, rational polypharmacy, as they call it. And Dr. Anand had even gone so far as to refer him for nutritional and weight management therapy and consultation to try to get this guy's weight under control. How many pill mills send their patients to um, a nutritionist? I'll tell you what, zero. But anyways, this gentleman came in and he had real pathology and he had real pain, and he was, believable. And the government made a big deal about Dr. Anand prescribing him diclofenac gel, which is like a super duper aspirin jelly. And now you can buy that stuff over the counter now. But he brought in 2 unused tubes of diclofenac and said he wasn't taking it. So the FBI had seized it, put it in evidence bags, and then when they were describing this scenario about unnecessary prescribing of these diclofenac jelly tubes, they passed these FBI sealed diclofenac tubes, which were unopened in the boxes, labeled with FBI as FBI evidence. They passed these around like they were OJ's bloody glove. It was outrageous. It was comical, and it was absolutely pathetic. But that goes back to what I was saying before. They do this to confuse a medically naive jury. The jury is not a jury of his peers. They're not physicians. They really don't know what these drugs are. They don't know anything about the practice of medicine or the practice of pain. They don't know anything about the Controlled Substances Act. They don't know anything about what the standard practice is. And so they're very, very malleable, pliable, I guess is the term. You can mold them in any way you want, whether it's, and then that gets us to Dr. Timothy King, who is the the medical expert for the prosecution. But it was just underhanded, I think, the way they did that. And all of us who know anything about diclofenac and prescribing of non-narcotic pain management drugs, were just looking at each other dumbfounded while we were in the gallery observing what was the legal proceedings. We were just we were all just shaking our heads at each other, um, glancing at each other like, what in the world is this? And this guy obviously wasn't was a outlier. He wasn't easily treated. He'd been, he'd been sort of, optimized the best you possibly can optimize somebody, and he still was having pain complaints. But that doesn't make anything that Dr. Anand was doing criminal.
And that's the whole thing, is creating a violation of the law from nothing. That's what happened to us because our laws now have mushroomed significantly, that anything that you do, any activity that you do could be misconstrued, misinterpreted, and presented to a jury that it's a criminal action. Anything that you do
Yep.
in a physician's office, even if you take a deep breath in a physician's office. For example, I gave an example when I wrote an article for the Kevin MD blog, that if, for example, your fire extinguisher, the expiration date, the renewal date on your fire extinguisher runs out, you are in violation of the Healthcare Fraud Act because you violated Medicare participation. You had unsafe conditions because the fire extinguisher expired. And every claim you submit after that is healthcare fraud. So any physician out there, if everything is not dotted, if your fire extinguisher expiration is gone, you can go to jail for up to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare fraud.
Yep. They make the rules, and they also move the goalposts. In our case, they make it almost impossible. And this goes back to their playbook that's issued from Washington, D.C. on how to successfully prosecute a healthcare professional. Boy, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's and it's very interesting. Dr. Anand talked about the fact of how do they select these individuals that they're going to prosecute. In his case, it was selective artificial intelligence, where they targeted him because he's a minority, the brown and black minority, the Middle Eastern minority.
Yep.
The Indian minority. Dr. Rahindra Batra is Indian. Doesn't matter if he has white folks working with him. Doesn't matter. They'll just be collateral damage, or maybe they'll flip and testify against him. But basically, is the targeting of minorities, and the statistics from the U.S. Commission for Sentencing confirms that minorities are targeted more frequently than individuals who are white, than individuals who are not minorities. The black and brown communities, the Indians, the Middle Easterns, the Jewish, they're targeted more often. They're targeted 5 to 10 times more often than other individuals.
Yes, that's a great point, Doctor. And I agree. In our case, the Batra case, Dr. Batra was of Indian descent, and there were four of us who actually went to trial, and two of my co-defendants were African American. One was a real African American. I mean, he was from Nigeria. The other was Dr. David Lewis, who happened to be African American, but he was born and raised in Detroit. And I was the only Caucasian, standing trial, but our patients were probably 85% African American in a very depressed area socioeconomically. And most of our patients were either Medicaid, or a lot of them didn't have any insurance. And, we treated them anyways as best we could. So not only are they going after the minority physicians, but they're also going after the minority patient populations who suffer when a physician is extracted from their communities.
Yeah.
Let me go back to my point that I had lost my train of thought on earlier. I was talking about how the prosecutors move the goalposts without any sort of accountability. In our case, they had made a big deal at our arraignment and our arrest and our indictment about how we were overprescribing opiates. And then 3.5 years later, we get to trial, and all of a sudden their narrative had changed to underprescribing. I mean, you just can't make this up. they told the jury that we were underprescribing, and the reason or the rationale that they said we were underprescribing was so that we wouldn't get caught, and we were trying to fly underneath the radar, which was a bunch of hogwash. Because anytime you write a controlled substance prescription in the state of Michigan, that prescription goes to the prescribing database that's public record, and it tells you who prescribed what and in what quantity and where it was filled and on what date it was filled and what pharmacist filled it and the location of the pharmacy. So there's no way to fly under the radar. And yet they told the jury that we were intentionally underprescribing after had made a big deal about us overprescribing. The story changed when they got more facts that we were underprescribing, and you just can't make this up.
Absolutely.
You just can't make this stuff up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And our colleague, Dr. Linda Cheek, who runs the Doctors of Courage blog, she refers to these patients as dispensable.
Yep.
The ones that the country or the government wants to, is okay if they're gone.
It's okay.
If they don't get pain medications and they die or kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, the dispensable were citizens, Pennsylvania citizens, who were actually white folks, poor white folks living in Middle Earth, Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania, that had no psychiatrist, and I was providing them psychiatric services and psychotherapy, and the government didn't even think that they deserved psychotherapy. They didn't even think that they deserved to be talked to. Those were dirt poor folks from central Pennsylvania, who were dispensable, who had Medicare that nobody cared for.
Right. Yeah. Call me cynical, and because I agree with you. If these patients are lost to follow up, lose their access to care, or if they die, it saves the government money and it saves the private insurers money. And I would have never believed it, but we had 25,000 past and current patients that were just thrown to the fentanyl-laced streets overnight. They lost their access to pain care physicians, and we were the only clinic in Detroit, and Detroit is a massive city.
Mm-hmm.
We were the only clinic that was accepting Medicaid patients,
Mm-hmm.
so they had no other options, and they lost access to their physicians without any warning overnight. They lost access to their medical records because those records were seized. There's supposedly a program out there called the Opioid Rapid Response Program, which is evidently federally funded. The DA is supposed to get all this money from the feds to help these patients who are displaced by an enforcement action, to find similarly qualified physicians so they maintain continuity of care. And according to Claudia Morandi, not one single person has ever been helped by this federally funded program.
They got doged. They got doged. That program got doged.
Well, this was before Doge. I mean, this program had been around for a long time, and even when they weren't doged and they were getting funded, and they had Stephanie Rubel or something like that.
Is still there. She is still there.
And this was the DEA was pounding their chests about this program, and they were getting all this money, and it makes you wonder, where was this money going, and what patients did they help?
It was contributing to the Democratic Party to make up allegations about other politicians.
Right. Well, Claudia Morandi has gone into this in depth, and she has a incredible story about her dealings with the people who are supposed to be administrating this program, and this even includes one of them calling her to tell her to quote unquote shut up, and was screaming at Claudia over the phone because Claudia was exposing this. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's unbelievable. You just can't make this stuff up. And Claudia is one of the most reliable, believable people I know. And
just to think that we are just to be a little bit political, but we are hearing a lot of screaming from different parties that what is being done to this Justice Department, that they are basically firing people left and right in the Justice Department, and how is that gonna change things? Well, I think it's going to change things to the better. We're not going to have this type of prosecutors. We're not going to have the Paul Koob. We're not going to have the Arun Pudapati. We're not going to have the Patrick Campbell. That's the team that prosecuted Dr. Anand. This Punkawala who was told by the judge to sit down.
Yep.
It's
And the little Napoleon.
Yes, yes. And so I don't know. I don't know. I mean, uh, definitely, the Justice Department needs significant cleanup, and hopefully, there is going to be divine intervention and divine justice for Dr. Anand with the appeals court. This is going to go to the appeals court, and
Yep.
all of this that was done, even though it was the jury's verdict, all of this that was done is significant errors in terms of impinging on the constitutional rights of Dr. Anand. And I hope
Uh,
that the
I think I think two other. I agree with you 100%. I think two other things that need to be done too. These agencies are just full of bloat and redundancy and waste and this sort of clown show that they're trying to pull off by going after credible physicians. In order for this to really stop, they have to have some skin in the game because they don't right now. So, two things: getting rid of immunity for these prosecutors
Mhm,
would give them pause before they actually went and brought a weak or a fraudulent case against a physician.
mhm, mhm,
And secondly, is loser pays. If a doctor's life has been disrupted and for years and years and years and gone through the trauma,
mhm,
lost their practice and their income, and had to sell their house and their property to pay their attorney fees, the loser has to pay.
mhm.
Um, and that would also give the government pause because as of right now, there's just absolutely no protections. And we have a mutual friend, and I just got off the phone with him. I talked to him for about 2 hours the other night on the phone, Dr. David Stein. And Dr. David Stein, he's adamant about in this current environment, physicians just need to stop prescribing controlled substances because there are absolutely no protections, none, zero. And it is just too risky. And as sad as that is for our patients who require opioid analgesics, it's just much too risky for a physician, not only for himself, but for his family and for his future to prescribe until there are real reforms, some common sense policies are put into place and some clarity is given to physicians because right now the government moves the goalposts all over the place to secure these convictions, and they change the standards. They conflate guidelines into hard and fast rules. They are always tiptoeing and dancing around what the true standard of practice is, and they've developed a system where it's um, one medical expert versus another medical expert, and if they disagree, and the government expert um, uh, prevails, then the doctor is guilty of fraud. And this is absurd. Lawyers disagree all the time. Judges disagree all the time. Bridge builders disagree on how to build a bridge all the time. And that doesn't make one person guilty of criminal fraud. I mean, that's the case for physicians. And there was an amicus brief for the Rwan case that was written by an outfit here in Florida called Physicians Against Abuse. And their amicus was written by an attorney out of Cape Coral named
Mhm,
Sebastian Ohanian.
mhm,
And it went over this point about the government experts and expert versus expert equals a conviction kind of thing. He articulated all these things, and it was probably the most beautiful written piece of legal scholarly legal print that I've ever read. And I had read this while I was going through my prosecution, and I can tell you that that was probably the single thing that gave me hope that there was at least a ray of hope that I could prevail because
sure.
everything that he was talking about made perfect sense to me. That was the Rwan amicus brief by Sebastian Ohanian out of the
Mhm,
organization called Physicians Against Abuse. And anybody who's interested, they'd be happy to contact me, and I can,
sure, sure.
point them in the right direction.
And I when I was going through my prosecution and before my trial, I read this book that was written by an attorney by the name of Rob Carey, Cary. He's a criminal defense attorney in Washington, D.C. And he wrote this book called Not Guilty: The Unlawful Prosecution of U.S. Senator Ted Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Senator Ted Stevens was the lion of the Senate. He had been a senator for 40 years for Alaska. And to think that at that time there was a Democratic president, Senator Ted Stevens was a Republican senator. And this Democratic president wanted to pass a very unpopular healthcare law named under him, the president's care. I'm not going to mention his name. And this senator was actually resisting the passage of this law. Lo and behold, some charges, fraud charges, were invented against this senator, claiming that he had asked a contractor to renovate his house and he did not pay him, and that there were some free services. And
Right.
so basically, this senator was indicted about 90 days prior to his election, re-election for the Senate in Alaska. He ended up losing the election. He was actually found guilty at trial. However, 3 months after the trial, two whistleblowers from the FBI came forward and indicated that the prosecutors fabricated the evidence against the senator, that the prosecutors basically did not disclose exculpatory evidence that the senator actually paid and wanted to pay for the actual cost of the renovation of his house. And basically, the verdict against the senator was vacated. It was declared null and void, even though it was a jury verdict because of the misconduct by the prosecutors. One of the prosecutors, unfortunately, was so much shamed that he actually took his own life.
Wow.
And basically, Senator Ted Stevens was not reelected, and he actually ended up dying, unfortunately, in an airplane crash in Alaska 2 years later. But this attorney, Rob Carey, wrote this book. So if the United States Department of Justice could prosecute this prominent senator to
Right.
make sure that a certain healthcare law that was unfavorable passes, because once this senator was taken out of the way, the replacing senator agreed to vote for this unpopular healthcare law that we ended up with now 15 years later, a very unpopular healthcare law that affected our practice of medicine. But you know the whole system is corrupt, and if you don't agree with them, they'll take you out, even if you're a very prominent senator.
Right. That I'm unaware of that, and I'll look into it. But it doesn't surprise me one bit. Um, I would like to sort of backtrack a little bit. We did talk about Ron Chapman, and he was integrally involved in our case, and I think in our acquittals. He was brilliant, and I got to see him in action. And if anybody is going potentially facing the feds in court, um, I would suggest you don't go within 17 miles of a federal courthouse without Ron Chapman following your 2 feet behind you in your footsteps, because he's just that good. He has a lot of hype, but I saw him in action, and he's genius. He's a fire breathing dragon. Nothing gets by him. Prosecutors are afraid of him. FBI special agents are afraid of him because he is just brilliant. And um, um, uh, he played a large part in our acquittals. They just didn't have any answers for him. Um,
I can tell you he was involved in my case. He assisted my main attorney, Mr. Paul Hetznecker. Mr. Paul Hetznecker was actually one of the attorney for Dr. Anand's co-defendants who
Rule 29. Yeah.
29. He got her off. Unfortunately, the attorneys didn't agree on a joint defense agreement with Dr. Anand and the other defendants, which is quite unfortunate. They could
Yeah,
have had a stand together, and they could have been all acquitted together if they had stood up to the government
right.
together.
And that's unfortunate. That's what we did. All four of us, even though we weren't allowed to communicate, we knew we were innocent, and we were all on the same uh, page, all on the same page of the playbook. None of us felt like we were guilty of anything that had been charged against us, and we had a joint defense, and we synced. All of our attorneys sort of were on the same page as we were, and we went in unified, and we secured acquittals on all charges on all the defendants in our case. Yeah, yeah. Like I said before, I'm heartbroken for the Anand family. I'm worried about Dr. Anand. I haven't had a chance to talk to him since the verdicts were handed down. I just don't know what to say to him. I don't sure nothing I could say would make him feel any better, but I'm optimistic for the acquittal. I know he has a lot of support, not only from his friends, but fellow physicians and a lot of his patients and patient advocates all over the country and if not all over the world. So I just hope that he does not forget that and that he has a lot of people who care about him and he has a lot of people who would just do anything that they possibly could to support him.
And we are here having this conversation on our Saturday afternoon because we love Dr. Anand. We support him. He has our unconditional support, and we hope that there is still chances for the appeals court to intervene with his verdict, with the jury's verdict, and we're going to support him 100% in terms of putting up a strong case in terms of mitigation for his sentencing. So he's going to have a sentencing hearing sometime in August, and we're gonna put all efforts to write letters, character letters, and appeal letters to the judge to ensure that he gets the fairest sentence, and that would give him the chance possible for appeal with the Third Circuit of Appeal based on the multiple issues that were highlighted during his trial that were not addressed by the judge, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Dr. Russo, thank you very much for taking your time on a Saturday afternoon to support our colleague, Dr. Neil Anand. And we're going to keep the hope going for Dr. Anand, and we're going to stay in his support. And we're going to show up in force to the sentencing hearing. We're going to send letter of supports. We're going to do character letters. We're going to do mitigation on his behalf because we believe that he is not guilty of the charges that were leveled against him, and that the jury was misguided by the prosecution in reaching this unjust verdict. And we're going to continue to support other physicians who are going through the same wretched system that is persecuting physicians. Dr. Russo, thank you very much for being with us today and for your unwavering support of Dr. Anand.
The pleasure's been all mine. As Doc Norm always says, if you don't fight, you can't win. And this fight's just getting started. Thank you,
And
sir.
to our all of our colleagues, physicians, I remember always the words of my friend, Dr. Pharmacist and dentist, Norm Clement. You are within the norms. Thank you, and this is the virtual psychiatrist.